The sight of Nathan Turner dragging himself through the door of his ranch house with a bullet graze along his ribs and blood soaking through his shirt was enough to make any man reconsider the mail-order bride advertisement he had placed 6 months prior. But there she stood on his porch in McGill, Nevada, clutching a worn leather satchel and staring at him with eyes the color of honey while speaking rapid words in a language he had never heard before. Nathan pressed his hand harder against the wound, trying to stanch the bleeding while simultaneously trying to process the situation before him. The stage-coach driver who had brought her stood behind the young woman, looking apologetic and clearly eager to be on his way before any more trouble found them on this dusty stretch of Nevada territory. "This here is your bride, Turner," the driver said quickly, handing Nathan a crumpled envelope. "Came all the way from someplace I cannot even pronounce. Good luck to you both." He tipped his hat and was back on the coach before Nathan could protest or ask questions about the blood still seeping between his fingers. The woman took a step forward, her dark hair pulled back in an intricate braid, her dress simple but well made, clearly sewn by skilled hands. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 22 or 23, and there was an intelligence in her gaze that suggested she understood far more than her incomprehensible words would indicate. She spoke again, gesturing at his wound with concern etched across her features. "I do not understand you," Nathan said slowly, enunciating each word as if volume and clarity might somehow bridge the chasm between their languages. "I am hurt. Bad men. Rustlers." He pointed toward the direction he had come from, then touched his side again. She pushed past him into the house without hesitation, setting her satchel down and immediately beginning to search through his kitchen cupboards. Nathan stood there, dizzy from blood loss and confusion, watching this stranger move through his home with purpose. She found his medical supplies, a bottle of whiskey and clean rags, then pointed firmly at the wooden chair near the table. "Sit," she said, though the word was different, softened by her accent and foreign tongue, yet the meaning was unmistakable in her tone and gesture. Nathan sat, too tired and wounded to argue. She unbuttoned his shirt with efficient fingers, not a trace of embarrassment on her face, and examined the wound with the practiced eye of someone who had tended injuries before. She spoke softly as she worked, her words melodic and soothing even though he understood nothing. The whiskey burned as she cleaned the wound, but her touch was gentle, almost tender, and Nathan found himself studying her face, the curve of her cheek, the concentration in her eyes. When she finished bandaging him, she cleaned her hands and then pointed at herself. "Helena," she said clearly, then pointed at him with raised eyebrows. "Nathan," he replied, touching his chest. "Nathan Turner." "Nah then," she repeated carefully, her pronunciation slightly off but charming nonetheless. She smiled for the first time, a small hesitant curve of her lips that transformed her entire face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. The first week was an exercise in frustration and improvised communication. Nathan had expected his mail-order bride would speak English, or at least enough to get by. The advertisement agency had assured him that all their candidates were educated women seeking new opportunities in America. What they had failed to mention was that educated might mean literate in a completely different language. Helena, he discovered through careful observation and mime, was from a small region in Eastern Europe, though the specific country remained a mystery. She had brought with her a small book written in her native tongue, which she read by lamplight each evening, her lips moving silently as her finger traced the lines. She was an excellent cook, despite having to learn his kitchen and the ingredients available in this harsh Nevada landscape. She kept the house cleaner than it had been in years, and she tended the small vegetable garden with skill that suggested farming was not foreign to her. But the silence between them was deafening. Nathan would return from checking the cattle or mending fences to find her waiting with dinner prepared, and they would sit across from each other at the table, eating in a quiet that felt heavier with each passing day. He tried to speak to her about his day, about the ranch, about anything, but she would only nod politely, understanding nothing, and the words would die in his throat. On the 8th day, as the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples across the Nevada desert, Nathan made a decision. He retrieved the book from Helena's room, where she had left it on the small table beside the bed. They did not share. He had been sleeping in the barn, giving her privacy and space, knowing that their marriage was legal but feeling it would be wrong to expect anything from her when they could not even speak to each other. Helena found him at the kitchen table that evening, her book open before him, a piece of paper beside it where he had been attempting to copy the strange letters. She stopped in the doorway, surprise evident on her face. Nathan looked up, feeling foolish but determined. He pointed at a word on the page, then at his mouth, then at her. "Teach me," he said, knowing she would not understand the words but hoping she would understand the meaning. For a long moment, Helena simply stared at him. Then her eyes filled with tears and she crossed the room quickly, sitting down beside him. She touched the word he had pointed to and spoke it clearly. "Dom," she said. "Home." "Dom," Nathan repeated, his pronunciation awkward. "Home." She nodded enthusiastically and pointed at another word. "Voda." "Water." "Voda." "Water." They continued until the lamp oil ran low and exhaustion pulled at them both. Nathan's head ached from concentrating so hard, but he felt something shift between them, a bridge beginning to form across that vast linguistic divide. The rustlers returned 3 weeks later, just as Nathan was beginning to form simple sentences in Helena's language. He had learned that it was a Slavic tongue, similar to but distinct from Russian, which he discovered when a traveling merchant passed through who knew a few words. The merchant had been surprised at Nathan's dedication to learning such an obscure language. "Most men would have sent her back," the merchant had said, shaking his head. "Too much trouble for a wife who cannot even speak proper." But Nathan had only bought the supplies he needed and sent the man on his way. He had no intention of sending Helena back. Not when she smiled at him each morning over coffee, pleased when he wished her good morning in her language. Not when she had started leaving fresh wildflowers on the kitchen table, small touches that made the house feel like a home. Not when his heart had begun to beat faster whenever she was near, even though they had not so much as held hands. The rustlers came at dawn, 4 men on horseback, armed and looking for easy cattle to steal. Nathan had dealt with them before, the same group that had given him the bullet graze that first day Helena arrived. They were getting bolder, more aggressive, and Nathan knew this confrontation would not end peacefully. Helena was in the garden when she heard the shouting. She dropped her basket of vegetables and ran toward the house, fear clutching at her chest. She had heard that tone before in the old country, the sound of men intent on violence. Through the window, she saw Nathan facing down 4 men, his rifle in his hands but outnumbered and outgunned. Without thinking, Helena grabbed the hunting rifle Nathan had shown her how to load just days before. He had been teaching her to shoot, worried about leaving her alone on the ranch. She had been a quick study, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. Now she moved to the window, opened it quietly, and took aim. The crack of the rifle startled everyone. One of the rustlers yelled as his hat flew off his head, the bullet passing close enough to singe his hair. Helena worked the lever action and fired again, this time splintering the wooden fence post right beside another man's horse. "She is a damn good shot," one of the rustlers shouted, his horse dancing nervously beneath him. "Let us get out of here." Nathan took advantage of their distraction, firing his own rifle over their heads. "Next time I will not miss," he shouted. "And neither will she. This is your only warning. Stay off my land." The rustlers did not need to be told twice. They spurred their horses and disappeared in a cloud of dust, their curses fading with the sound of hoofbeats. Nathan turned to find Helena emerging from the house, the rifle still in her hands, her face pale but determined. He crossed to her quickly, taking the weapon gently and setting it aside. His hands found hers and he spoke rapidly in her language, the words tumbling out in a mix of correct grammar and improvised vocabulary. "You were so brave. You saved my life. I was so frightened. You are amazing. Thank you, thank you." Helena's hands trembled in his, the adrenaline fading and leaving her shaky. She responded in her native tongue, speaking quickly, and Nathan caught enough words to understand. "I was terrified. I thought they would kill you. I could not let that happen. I had to protect you." "Why?" Nathan asked softly, switching to English without thinking. "Why protect me?" She understood his tone if not his words. Her honey-colored eyes met his, and she spoke a phrase he had heard before in her language, one he had asked her to translate weeks ago when he had come across it in her book. "Because you matter to me, because I care what happens to you." Nathan's thumbs stroked across her knuckles, his heart pounding harder now than it had during the confrontation with the rustlers. "Helena," he said her name like a prayer. He had been trying so hard to learn her language, to bridge the gap between them, but in this moment, he realized that some things transcended words. The way she looked at him, the way she had risked herself to protect him, the way his entire world seemed to center around her presence. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When they opened again, they were bright with unshed tears and something else, something that made Nathan's breath catch. "May I?" He asked softly in her language, though he was not sure he had the words right. "May I kiss you?" Helena's smile was answer enough. She rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of all the words they could not yet say to each other, all the feelings that had been growing in the silence and the learning, in the shared meals and the small kindnesses. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his hands cradling her face. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered in English, then repeated it in her language, stumbling over the pronunciation but meaning every syllable. "I love you." Helena's tears spilled over, but she was laughing, her hands gripping his shirt. "I love you too," she said in her language, then tried in English, her accent thick but the words clear enough. "I love you, Nathan." The summer heat that year was brutal, turning the Nevada desert into a furnace and testing the mettle of everyone who tried to make a living in its unforgiving landscape. But inside the Turner Ranch house, there was laughter and love, and the constant sound of two people learning to speak each other's languages, both with words and without. Nathan proved to be a dedicated student. He practiced Helena's language every spare moment, writing out phrases and vocabulary in a notebook he carried with him while working. Helena, in turn, began to pick up English with increasing speed. She would point at objects around the house and the ranch, asking for the English word, then repeating it until Nathan confirmed her pronunciation. They established a routine where mornings were conducted primarily in English, to help Helena practice, and evenings were in her native tongue, to help Nathan improve. The afternoons were a chaotic mix of both, with generous amounts of gesturing and laughing when one or the other could not find the right word. "What is the word for when the sky does this?" Helena asked one evening in heavily accented English, gesturing at the sunset painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. "Sunset," Nathan replied, then added the word in her language that he had learned. "Or is there a better word, a more beautiful word?" Helena considered, her head tilted as she watched the sky. "In my language, we have a word that means the sky is on fire. It is what we say for the most beautiful sunsets, the ones that make your heart ache." "Teach me," Nathan said, as he had said so many times before. She spoke the word, and he repeated it, feeling the unfamiliar syllables in his mouth. They stood together on the porch, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder, and watched the sky burn with color until the stars began to emerge. Those first months of their marriage were not without challenges. The language barrier, though shrinking daily, still caused misunderstandings. There was the time Nathan thought Helena was asking him to fix the chicken coop, when she actually wanted him to help her prepare a traditional dish from her homeland that required a specific type of pot. There was the evening Helena became convinced Nathan was angry with her when he was actually just concentrating hard on reading a letter, his brow furrowed in thought rather than frustration. But each misunderstanding was resolved with patience and, increasingly, with affection. They learned to check, to ask questions, to confirm rather than assume. And in the process, they learned each other in ways that went beyond language. Nathan discovered that Helena hummed when she was content, always the same melody, a song from her childhood. Helena learned that Nathan had a habit of running his hand through his hair when he was worried, leaving it standing on end in a way she found endearing. The nearest town to the Turner Ranch was McGill, a small but growing community that served the surrounding ranches and the mining operations in the area. It was a full day's ride, which meant trips were infrequent and had to be well planned. Nathan had been putting off a supply run, reluctant to leave Helena alone for that long, but they were running low on essentials. "I want to come with you," Helena said one morning, her English much improved after 3 months of intensive practice. "I want to see the town. I want to meet other people." Nathan hesitated. "It is a long ride, and some of the people in town can be—" He paused, searching for a diplomatic way to phrase it. "They can be unkind to strangers, to people who are different." Helena's expression hardened, a look Nathan had learned meant she was preparing to be stubborn. "I am your wife. I am not hiding here like something shameful. We go together." She was right, of course. Nathan knew he had been overprotective, wanting to shield her from potential prejudice and cruelty. But Helena was strong, stronger than he had given her credit for, and she deserved to live her life fully, not hidden away on the ranch. "All right," he agreed. "We go together. But if anyone gives you trouble, you tell me immediately." Helena's smile was brilliant. "I can take care of myself. Remember the rustlers?" Nathan laughed and pulled her into his arms. "How could I forget? You are the best shot in Nevada." The ride to McGill took most of the day, but the journey was pleasant. Helena was delighted by everything they saw, exclaiming over a family of jackrabbits, fascinated by the way the heat created shimmering mirages on the horizon, and asking questions about every plant and rock formation. Nathan found himself seeing the landscape through her eyes, rediscovering beauty in a place he had taken for granted. McGill was bustling when they arrived, the main street crowded with wagons and people. Nathan helped Helena down from her horse, acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. Helena's accent, her slightly foreign appearance, and her confident bearing made her stand out in the small town. They had just entered the general store when Nathan heard a familiar voice. "Well, well, Turner finally brought his foreign bride to town. Heard you got yourself a woman who cannot even speak proper English. Nathan turned to see Jack Crawford, a rancher from a neighboring property, and someone who had never missed an opportunity to cause trouble. Crawford was a big man, running to fat now in his middle years, with small, mean eyes and a mouth that rarely said anything kind. "My wife speaks English perfectly well," Nathan said evenly, his hand finding Helena's. "Helena, this is Jack Crawford. Crawford, my wife, Helena Turner." Helena extended her hand politely, her English clear and precise. "It is nice to meet you, Mr. Crawford. Nathan has told me about you." Crawford ignored her hand, looking her up and down in a way that made Nathan's jaw clench. Foreign women. Never understood why a man would send away for one when there are plenty of good American girls around, but I suppose some men like exotic things. "I think you should watch your mouth," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. "Or what? You will teach me a lesson. You and your broken English bride." Before Nathan could respond, Helena stepped forward. Her expression was serene, but there was steel in her voice. "Mr. Crawford, where I come from, we have a saying. A man who insults a stranger reveals only his own poor character. I am sorry that meeting me has shown you in such a negative way. Perhaps next time we meet, you will have learned better manners." The store had gone quiet, everyone watching the confrontation. Crawford's face turned red, but before he could sputter a response, the storekeeper intervened. "That is enough, Crawford. You are welcome to take your business elsewhere if you cannot be civil." "Mrs. Turner, Mr. Turner, what can I help you with today?" Crawford stomped out, and gradually the normal sounds of the store resumed. Nathan squeezed Helena's hand, pride swelling in his chest. She had handled that better than he could have, turning Crawford's rudeness back on him without losing her composure. As they gathered their supplies, several women approached Helena, curiosity overcoming their initial reserve. One older woman, Martha Simmons, introduced herself as the wife of the local minister. "That was well handled, dear," Martha said warmly. "Crawford is a bully and everyone knows it. It is good to have a woman of spirit in the community. We have a ladies' gathering once a month. We would be delighted if you would join us." Helena looked at Nathan, who nodded encouragingly. "I would like that very much," Helena said, her smile genuine. "Thank you for the invitation." By the time they left McGill, loaded with supplies and Helena with several new acquaintances, Nathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Helena had proven she could hold her own, and the community had, for the most part, welcomed her. The few narrow-minded individuals like Crawford were outnumbered by decent folks willing to give her a chance. On the ride home, as the sun began to set, Helena moved her horse closer to Nathan's. "Thank you for bringing me," she said. "And thank you for defending me. But also thank you for letting me defend myself." "You were magnificent," Nathan replied in her language, then switched to English. "I am proud to be your husband." Helena's smile could have lit the darkening sky. "And I am proud to be your wife." The fall brought cooler temperatures and the hard work of preparing for winter. Nathan taught Helena the rhythms of ranch life, the constant maintenance that kept everything running. She took to it naturally, working beside him to repair fences, tend the cattle, and stockpile supplies. Her hands, which had been soft when she first arrived, developed calluses. Her skin, which had been pale, took on a golden tan despite her best efforts with bonnets and long sleeves. They had moved into the same bedroom after their trip to McGill, a natural progression that felt right to both of them. Their physical relationship grew alongside their emotional connection, each learning what pleased the other, communicating in touches and sighs when words failed them. One crisp October evening, Helena came to find Nathan in the barn where he was checking on a pregnant cow. She had a strange expression on her face, nervous and excited, and something else he could not quite identify. "Nathan, I need to tell you something," she said in her native language, which she still preferred for important conversations where precision mattered. Nathan straightened, immediately concerned. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Nathan could not process the words. Then a joy so profound it was almost painful flooded through him. He crossed to her in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "A baby, Helena. We are having a baby." She laughed, holding onto his shoulders. "Careful, you will make me dizzy." He set her down gently, immediately worried. "Are you feeling well? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working so hard? We need to get you to a doctor." Helena cupped his face in her hands, still laughing. "I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But yes, we should go to the doctor in McGill to confirm and make sure everything is progressing normally." Nathan could not stop smiling. He placed his hand carefully on her still flat stomach, imagining the life growing there, the child who would be part of both of them. "I love you," he said in her language, the words flowing easily now after months of practice. "I love you so much, Helena." "I love you too," she replied in English, then switched to her native tongue. "When I came here, I was so frightened. I did not know what kind of man you would be. I did not know if I would ever feel at home again. But you learned my language. You learned to speak to me in the words of my heart. How could I not love you?" They stood together in the barn, holding each other as the last light of day faded and the stars began to appear. The cow lowed softly in her stall, the horses nickered, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. The sounds of the Nevada night, which had once seemed harsh and foreign to Helena, now felt like home. The winter was hard but manageable. Nathan was obsessively careful with Helena, constantly worried about her health and the babies. Helena bore his concern with patient amusement, continuing to work as much as he would allow, which was considerably less than she wanted. "Women in my village worked in the fields until the day they gave birth," she told him exasperatedly one January morning when he had insisted she stay inside while he handled the morning chores. "I am healthy and strong. The baby is healthy and strong. We will both go mad if you keep me wrapped in cotton." But Nathan was adamant, and eventually, Helena compromised, taking on the indoor tasks and leaving the outdoor work to him. She spent the winter months sewing baby clothes, preparing the small spare room to be a nursery, and reading every book on pregnancy and childbirth she could get her hands on, which admittedly were not many in rural Nevada. Martha Simmons became a frequent visitor, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby items from her own grown children. Through Martha, Helena formed connections with other women in the community. Despite the language barrier that still occasionally tripped her up, Helena found friendship and support among the ranch wives and town ladies. In early March, just as the first hints of spring were touching the desert, Helena woke Nathan in the middle of the night. "It is time," she said calmly, though he could hear the tension beneath the words. "The baby is coming." Nathan, who had remained calm in the face of rustlers, drought, and every other challenge the West had thrown at him, nearly panicked. He fumbled for his clothes, knocking over the bedside lamp and cursing in both English and Helena's language, which made her laugh despite the contraction gripping her body. "Nathan, breathe," she instructed. "We have time. First babies take many hours usually. We need to get Martha and the doctor, but we do not need to rush like the house is on fire." But Nathan rushed anyway, riding through the darkness to fetch Martha first, who came immediately, then on to McGill to bring back the doctor. By the time he returned with the physician, dawn was breaking and Helena's labor was well established. What followed was the longest day of Nathan's life. He paced the living room, banned from the bedroom by Martha, who insisted he would only be in the way. He could hear Helena during the worst of the contractions, trying to stay quiet but sometimes crying out despite herself. Each sound tore at him, making him feel helpless and useless. Finally, as the sun began to set, there was a different sound. A sharp, indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Nathan was on his feet instantly, staring at the bedroom door. It seemed like an eternity before Martha emerged, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Nathan Turner, a healthy, strong boy with a good set of lungs on him." And Helena did beautifully. "She is tired but well. Come meet your son." Nathan entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Helena was propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Nathan crossed to them, hardly daring to breathe. "Meet your son," Helena said softly, her English mixing with her native language in her exhaustion. "Meet our beautiful boy." The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a surprising amount of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. He was the most perfect thing Nathan had ever seen. With trembling hands, he reached out and Helena carefully transferred the baby to his arms. "Hello, little one," Nathan whispered, his voice breaking. "Welcome to the world. I am your father, and I promise you I will always protect you. I will always love you, and I will teach you to speak your mother's language so you will always know where you come from." Tears were streaming down Helena's face. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said. "I knew it from the moment you started learning my language." A man who tries that hard to speak to someone's heart is a man who will move mountains for his child. They decided to name their son Daniel, which worked well in both English and Helena's native tongue. Little Daniel Turner proved to be a healthy, hungry baby with a temperament that swung wildly between contentedly peaceful and dramatically furious. There seemed to be no middle ground. The first few months were exhausting, but filled with joy. Nathan found himself completely enchanted by his son, fascinated by every tiny change and development. He would spend hours just watching Daniel sleep, marveling at the impossibility of this small person who was part of him and part of Helena. Helena adapted to motherhood with the same determination and grace she had shown in adapting to life in Nevada. She sang to Daniel in her native language, soft lullabies from her childhood, and told him stories that Nathan could only partly follow but loved to hear. She had a seemingly endless supply of folk tales and songs, pieces of her culture that she was passing on to their son. True to his word, Nathan made sure Daniel heard both languages from the beginning. They established a pattern where Nathan spoke to Daniel in English and Helena in her native tongue, and between them, they used whatever language felt natural. It resulted in conversations that sometimes jumped between languages mid-sentence, but it felt right, felt like their family. "Do you ever miss it?" Nathan asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, Daniel asleep in Helena's arms. "Your home country, your family." Helena was quiet for a long moment. "I miss some things," she admitted finally. "I miss my mother. I miss the forests and the mountains, which are so different from this desert. I miss certain foods and certain celebrations. But I do not miss it the way you might think, because this is my home now. You are my home. Daniel is my home. How can I miss something when I have found something even better?" Nathan pulled her close, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby. "I still cannot believe you came all this way to marry a stranger. That took incredible courage." "I did not have much choice," Helena said quietly. "Things were very hard where I came from. There was poverty and violence and no future for women like me. I knew coming to America was dangerous, that I might end up with a cruel husband or worse. But I thought at least there would be a chance for something better. And I was right. I got you. I got lucky, Nathan said. I asked for a bride and got a partner, a friend, the love of my life. Your English has gotten very romantic, Helena teased gently. When I first arrived, you could barely string together a sentence. Now you are saying things like love of my life. I learned from the best. You are very good at romantic words in your language. All those poems you read from your book. I had to keep up. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The desert night was cool but not cold, perfect weather, and the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night were familiar and soothing. Life on the ranch found a new rhythm with Daniel. As he grew from an infant to a toddler, he proved to be a curious and active child who kept both his parents constantly on their toes. By the time he was 2, Daniel was speaking in a mix of both languages, often combining them in ways that were uniquely his own. He would ask for water, using his mother's word, then describe it as cold in English, and somehow everyone understood him perfectly. The rustler problem had largely resolved itself. After the confrontation where Helena had proven her marksmanship, word had spread that the Turner Ranch was not an easy target. The rustlers had moved on to more vulnerable prospects, and eventually, the law had caught up with them. Nathan heard through the grapevine that the gang had been arrested 2 territories over, tried and sentenced to prison. Without that constant threat, life became more peaceful, more settled. Nathan was able to focus on growing the ranch, expanding the herd and improving the property. Helena's garden flourished, providing vegetables that she preserved for winter, and she had started raising chickens, which Daniel found endlessly entertaining. The community in McGill had fully accepted Helena by now. Her English, while still accented, was fluent, and she had proven herself to be a capable, hard-working woman who contributed to the community. She helped with church socials, participated in the Ladies' Aid Society, and had even started teaching a few interested women some of the crafts from her homeland, intricate embroidery techniques that produced stunning results. Jack Crawford, the rancher who had been so rude on Helena's first visit to town, had suffered a series of setbacks. His own prejudices and poor management had cost him most of his herd, and he had been forced to sell his ranch and move away. Nathan took no pleasure in the man's downfall, but he could not help but feel a sense of justice that Crawford's cruelty had not been rewarded. When Daniel was 3, Helena became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because second pregnancies simply were easier sometimes. She carried the baby through another Nevada summer, and in late September, as the heat finally began to break, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Hannah, after a discussion where Helena insisted the name should start with H like hers, and Nathan had agreed, though he had wanted to give their daughter a name from Helena's native tongue. But Helena was firm. No, she will be Hannah Turner, an American name for an American girl. She will know her mother's language and culture, but she will never feel divided or uncertain about where she belongs. This is her home, her country. I want her name to reflect that. Hannah Turner was a remarkably peaceful baby compared to her brother. Where Daniel had been all dramatic cries and strong opinions, Hannah was content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes that seemed to take in everything. She rarely cried, and when she did, it was more of a persistent complaint than Daniel's outraged roars had been. Daniel was fascinated by his little sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, telling her stories in his unique blend of languages, showing her his favorite toys and reporting to his parents everything she did. "Mama," Hannah smiled. "Papa," Hannah grabbed my finger. "Look, she is watching me." The family of four settled into their life with a contentment that Nathan had never imagined possible. He thought back sometimes to that first day, when he had been wounded and bleeding, and Helena had appeared on his porch speaking words he could not understand. If someone had told him then how much his life would change, how full of love and laughter and purpose it would become, he would not have believed them. It was not always easy. There were hard years when the drought was severe and the cattle struggled. There were illnesses that swept through the community. Terrifying weeks when first Daniel and then Hannah came down with fever, and they could only wait and pray and hope. There were disagreements between Nathan and Helena, cultural differences that sometimes clashed, moments when the language barrier that had seemed so conquered would rear up again in a misunderstanding. But they worked through everything together. They had built their relationship on a foundation of effort and determination, on Nathan's stubborn refusal to accept that they could not communicate, and Helena's courage in building a life in a foreign land. That foundation held strong through every challenge. When Daniel was 10 and Hannah was 7, the family took a trip that Helena had been dreaming about for years. They traveled east, a long journey by train, to the port city where Helena had first arrived in America. From there, they boarded a ship bound for Europe, for Helena's homeland. It was an enormous undertaking, expensive and time-consuming, but Nathan had been saving for years, and Helena's parents had written that they were growing old and desperately wanted to meet their grandchildren. The decision was made, and the Turner family set off on an adventure. The journey took weeks, but eventually they arrived in Helena's village, a small community nestled in green mountains that were nothing like the Nevada desert. Helena's parents were elderly but still spry, and they wept when they saw their daughter again, and again when they met Nathan and the children. For a month, the Turners stayed in that small village. Daniel and Hannah were fascinated by everything: the dense forests, the cold streams, the ancient stone buildings, and the relatives who spoke in the language they had heard from their mother but never in such concentration. Nathan, whose understanding of Helena's language was now quite good, was able to communicate with his in-laws, though his accent would always mark him as a foreigner. Helena's mother pulled Nathan aside one day as he was watching Helena teach Hannah a traditional dance in the village square. "I was so afraid when my daughter said she was going to America," the older woman said softly in her native tongue. "I thought I would never see her again, that she would be lost to us forever. But you have made her happy. I can see it in every smile, every gesture. She found her home with you." Nathan put his arm around his mother-in-law. "She made me a better man. She taught me that love is not about speaking the same language from the start. It is about being willing to learn, to make the effort, to meet someone where they are and build a bridge together." When the month ended and it was time to return to Nevada, there were tears but also smiles. Helena had reconnected with her roots, her children had met their grandparents and cousins, and Nathan had seen the place that had shaped the woman he loved. It felt complete, like a circle closing. The journey back to Nevada seemed shorter somehow. When they finally arrived at the ranch, dusty and tired but happy, it truly felt like coming home. Daniel ran through the house, checking that everything was as they had left it. Hannah went straight to the garden, which their neighbor had been tending, to see how the plants had grown. And Nathan and Helena stood in the doorway, looking at the home they had built together. "No regrets?" Nathan asked, speaking in Helena's language as he often did when they were alone. "Not a single one," Helena replied in English, then switched to her native tongue. "Well, maybe one. I regret that I was so frightened when I first arrived that I did not tell you right away how kind your eyes were. How I knew from that first moment, even with the blood and the pain, that you were a good man. I was terrified of you, Nathan admitted with a laugh. This beautiful, competent stranger who swept into my home and took charge. I fell in love with you so fast, but I did not think someone like you could ever love someone like me. Someone like me. What does that mean? Educated, cultured, brave enough to travel across the world, you could have had anyone. Helena turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to cup his face in a gesture that had become familiar over the years. I could have had anyone, but I got you. The man who learned my language just so he could tell me he loved me in the words of my heart. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how precious? Nathan kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held all the years between that first day and this moment, all the love and struggle and triumph. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The years continued to pass in the way they do, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. Daniel grew into a tall, strong young man who had his father's steady nature and his mother's quick mind. He was fluent in both languages, and there was talk of him perhaps going east for university, which would have been impossible without the success of the ranch and his parents' careful saving. Hannah became a teacher in McGill, beloved by her students for her patience and creativity. She had inherited her mother's gift for languages and was teaching herself French and Spanish, dreaming of traveling the world someday. But for now, she was content in the small town, making a difference in children's lives. Nathan and Helena grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving a bit slower, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experience and the knowledge that they had built something lasting together. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, just as they had done when they were young, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant colors. Sometimes they spoke in English, sometimes in Helena's native language, and sometimes they did not need words at all. The conversation of a look, a touch, a smile that had been perfected over decades of marriage. "You remember," Nathan said one evening, speaking in the language he had learned for her, "that first day, when I came home bleeding and you were standing there, this stranger speaking words I could not understand. I remember thinking I had made a terrible mistake," Helena admitted. "That I had come all this way only to end up with a wounded man who might die and leave me alone in a strange land. And now I know it was not a mistake. It was fate, destiny. Whatever you want to call it, we were meant to find each other, you and I. We were meant to build this life." Nathan reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I learned your language to tell you I loved you, but I stayed in love with you because of who you are, your strength, your courage, your kindness, the way you laugh, the way you hum when you are happy. Everything. And I fell in love with you because you tried," Helena replied. "Because when faced with a barrier, you did not turn away. You climbed over it. You learned an entire language, something so difficult, just to speak to me. How could I not love a man who would do that?" As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, their hands linked, their hearts beating in harmony. Two people from different worlds who had met in the dusty expanse of Nevada and built something beautiful together. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel and Hannah visiting for dinner, their voices raised in playful argument about something inconsequential. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. Nathan had learned Helena's language to say, "I love you." But over the years, he had said it in 1,000 other ways. In the gentle way he cared for her when she was ill, in the pride he showed when introducing her to everyone they met, in the way he still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world even when they were both old and gray, in the life they had built together, a ranch that had become a home, a family that spanned cultures and languages, a love that had proven stronger than any barrier. And Helena had learned to say, "I love you" in English, but she too had said it in countless other ways. In the meals she prepared with care, in the way she had defended him from danger, in the songs she sang in her native tongue that carried the weight of her culture and her heart, in the way she had trusted him enough to build a life in this harsh land, so far from everything she had known. The sun set completely, leaving them in twilight, and still they sat, unwilling to move from this perfect moment. Around them, the ranch settled into night, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, the horses nickering in the barn, the desert creatures beginning their nocturnal routines. "Nathan," Helena said softly, using English because sometimes English was easier for certain things. "Thank you for learning my language, for trying when it would have been easier to send me back, for loving me when I could not even tell you I loved you too." "Milea moya," Nathan replied in her language, the endearment he had learned early and used often. "My darling, thank you for taking a chance on a wounded cowboy who could not even greet you properly when you arrived. Thank you for staying, for loving me, for building this life with me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, and Nathan wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. Inside, they could hear Daniel starting to tell Hannah a story, his voice animated, and both parents smiled, recognizing the tale as one Helena had told them years ago from her homeland. "Our children carry both our cultures," Helena observed. "They speak both our languages. They know both our stories. That is a good legacy." "The best legacy," Nathan agreed, "but not as good as the legacy of showing them what real love looks like, what it means to work through difficulties, to meet challenges together, to never give up on each other." They sat there until the night was fully dark and the temperature dropped enough that they needed to go inside. But before they moved, Nathan turned to Helena and said in her language, with perfect pronunciation after all these years of practice, "Ya tebia lubliu. I love you. Today, tomorrow, and always. In any language, in any words, my heart speaks only your name." Helena turned to kiss him, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "And I love you, my cowboy who learned to speak my language, my husband who built me a home, my love now and forever." They rose together and walked inside, into the warmth and light of their home, into the embrace of their family, into the life they had created through determination and love, and the simple choice to keep trying even when it was hard. The door closed behind them, and the Nevada night wrapped around the ranch house like a blanket. Inside, there was laughter and love and the sound of two languages blending into one beautiful conversation, the unique music of a family that had bridged worlds through the power of love and the willingness to learn. And if you listened very carefully, you might hear Nathan and Helena still, years later, teaching their grandchildren the words of love in both languages, passing down the story of how a mail-order bride came speaking no English, and a cowboy learned her language to say, "I love you," and how that simple act of devotion had built a legacy that would last for generations. The Turner Ranch would remain in the family for generations to come, each generation learning the story of Nathan and Helena, of the languages they spoke and the love they shared. The old house would be carefully maintained, the porch where they sat together becoming a sacred space where new couples would sit and watch the sunset and dream of building a love as strong as the founders of their family. But that is the future, and this story is about Nathan and Helena, about the choice to love across barriers, about the courage to build a life in a foreign land, about the power of language to connect hearts. It is a story about effort and dedication, about refusing to accept that two people from different worlds cannot find common ground. It is a story about a cowboy who learned a foreign language to tell a woman he loved her, and about a woman who came to a strange land and found not just a husband but a true partner. It is a story about family and legacy, about the bridges we build and the love we choose. And as Nathan and Helena would tell anyone who asked, it is a true story, as true as the Nevada sky above them, as solid as the ground beneath their feet, as enduring as the mountains in the distance. Their love story, told in two languages but spoken in the universal tongue of devotion, commitment, and an unwavering belief that love, real love, is worth any effort, any struggle, any challenge. The end.